This has to stop immediately. That's what the HOA lady said to me right after I moved into my dream house by the lake. I'm Kyler, and you won't believe what happened in just the first 30 minutes. No knock, no hello, she storms into my house and demands I give up my right to use the lake. But here's what she didn't know. She had no idea who I really was. By the end of this story, she's going to regret every word, because sometimes the quiet neighbor you try to bully owns way more than you think. Ever had an HOA nightmare? Comment below. I'm sure many of you can relate. Let's dive in. I couldn't believe what happened just 30 minutes after I moved into my dream house by the lake. It was supposed to be peaceful, but instead my world was turned upside down. So, there I was on Tuesday, October 15th at exactly 2:47 in the afternoon, standing in my brand new lakefront house, watching the moving truck pull away. 20 years in tech, and I'd finally bought my dream retirement home on Clearwater Lake. I'm talking about the kind of place you see in magazines. Wooden deck stretching out over crystal clear water, morning mist rolling across the surface. Complete silence except for the occasional loon call. After 2 decades of conference calls and coding marathons, this was supposed to be my peaceful chapter. The movers had just finished at 3:15, and I was standing there with a cup of coffee, thinking maybe I had actually figured out this whole work-life balance thing. Then out of nowhere, the doorbell rang at exactly 3:17. I wasn't expecting anyone, and honestly, I didn't want anyone. The timing felt intrusive, like someone had been watching and waiting for the perfect moment to disturb my first taste of peace. I opened the door to see a woman in her 50s standing tall, like she owned the place, her eyes scanning me with the kind of authority you can't ignore. She had that look, you know, the one, like she'd been practicing her angry face in the mirror for years. Before I could even say hello, she pushes right past me into my house. Not kidding. Just walks in like she owns the place and heads straight for the sliding door that faces the lake. I'm standing there thinking, did I miss something? Is this normal in small lake communities? She turned around, and the first words out of her mouth were, "This has to stop immediately." I'm looking around my empty house trying to figure out what exactly needs to stop. I'd been there for literally 30 minutes. "Excuse me," I said, because honestly, what else do you say when a stranger barges into your house and starts making demands? She points at the lake through my window and says, "You can't just waltz in here and think you can use our lake. This isn't some vacation spot for outsiders." Her dismissive attitude toward my property rights was both shocking and infuriating. The lake access was literally written into my deed. I tried to explain this to her, pulling out the paperwork from the lawyer's office that was still sitting on my kitchen counter, but she waves her hand like she's swatting away a fly and says, "I don't care what some old paper says. Old paper, we're talking about legal property documents here, not some grocery list I found in a drawer." Then she reaches into her little folder and pulls out this pre-printed document. Voluntary Lake Access Relinquishment Agreement, it said across the top. She slams it down on my counter and announces, "You will sign this today. It's for community safety and property values." I had to read that twice because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. This woman wanted me to voluntarily give up rights that I'd specifically paid for when I bought the house. "The last 3 homeowners signed this without any problems," she said, tapping her pen against the paper. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about me. How many others had fallen into this trap before? When I asked her for details, she brushed me off with a vague answer. HOA business. But something in her eyes made me think there was more to this. I tried to keep things professional, explaining that I'd need time to review the HOA bylaws and maybe consult with my attorney before signing anything. You'd think I'd asked her to donate a kidney. Her face went from annoyed to furious in about 2 seconds. "You have 24 hours, she snapped. "After that, we'll have to start daily safety inspections of your property, violation notices, special assessment fees." Then she leans forward and says in this really quiet, threatening voice, "Life gets very complicated for people who don't cooperate with the HOA." She turns to leave, but before she goes, she slams my door so hard that it rattled the windows. The second she's gone, I'm on the phone with my business partner, Ryan. "You're not going to believe what just happened," I tell him, and I can hear him chuckling already because he knows I tend to attract weird situations. But as I'm explaining about this HOA lady and her demand for my lake access, I notice something. On one of the moving boxes still sitting by the door, there's a business card that must have fallen out of my stuff. Thompson Rodriguez Marina Development, it says, with my name right there as co-owner. I'm looking at that card and thinking about how this woman had no idea who she was dealing with. See, here's the thing about quiet people. We're usually quiet for a reason. And sometimes that reason is that we're too busy building something bigger to waste time on small talk. This property wasn't just my retirement dream. It was chosen for very specific business reasons. Tomorrow, Janet, that's her name, Janet Hutchinson, HOA president. Tomorrow she's going to learn there's a big difference between messing with a regular homeowner and messing with someone who actually knows how lakefront property works. Tomorrow, Janet's world was going to crash down. She had no idea who she was really dealing with. I dove into public records, my eyes scanning every deed and HOA meeting minute, as if each paper might hold the key to unraveling this mystery. 20 years in tech teaches you how to dig into systems and find patterns. And let me tell you, this HOA situation had patterns written all over it. I spent that entire night doing what I do best, investigating. What I found made my blood run cold. Originally, there were 4 houses on our street with direct lake access rights written into their deeds. 4 families who had paid premium prices specifically for those rights. But according to recent records, 3 of those families had voluntarily surrendered their access within the past 3 years. That's a pretty big coincidence, don't you think? Especially since all 3 surrenders happened within a month of what the HOA minutes called compliance issues with their properties. As I traced the timeline, it became clear. The deeper I dug, the more I realized this wasn't just a series of coincidences. Janet had been in power for exactly 3 years. 3 years during which families had been systematically forced to surrender their lake rights. She'd been in charge for exactly 3 years and 2 months. Every single lake access surrender had happened during her presidency. I mean, I'm not one to jump to conclusions, but when you've spent 2 decades analyzing data patterns, this kind of correlation doesn't exactly scream random coincidence. The violations cited in the HOA records were things like improper landscaping maintenance and unauthorized outdoor storage. Pretty vague stuff that could apply to basically anyone if you squinted hard enough. But what really got my attention was how quickly these families went from violation notices to voluntary surrender. We're talking weeks, not months. That's not normal homeowner behavior. That's desperation behavior. The pattern was becoming disturbingly clear, and I realized Janet's intimidation tactics weren't new. They were a proven system she'd been using to systematically steal people's property rights for years. The next morning, I'm out checking my property lines when this sweet elderly voice calls out, "You must be our new neighbor." I turn around to see this tiny woman walking over from the house next door. She's probably 79, 80 years old with this gentle voice, but these really sharp, intelligent eyes. "I'm Mrs. Clark," she says. "Been living here for 26 years. 26 years. That means she's seen everything that's happened with the HOA. As we're talking, I mentioned that Janet stopped by yesterday, and I swear the temperature dropped 10 degrees. Mrs. Clark's whole demeanor changed. "Oh, honey," she says, looking around like she's worried someone might be listening. "You need to be very careful with that woman." The way she said it, like she was warning me about a dangerous animal, not a neighbor. Mrs. Clark starts telling me about the families who used to live in those houses with surrendered lake rights. The Millers, the Parkers, and the Williams family, she says, counting them off on her fingers. All good people, all had children who loved playing by the lake. The way she talked about them, you could tell she genuinely cared about these families. But then her voice gets really sad, and she explains how Janet used the same pattern every time. Made-up violations, daily harassment threatened them with lawyers and special fees until they couldn't take it anymore. As she tells me about the Williams family specifically, they had 3 kids who'd been fishing off that dock since they were toddlers. Janet made their lives so miserable that they ended up moving to another state just to get away from her. I'm listening to this thinking, what kind of person destroys families over lake access? But Mrs. Clark wasn't done. She's not just mean, honey, she's calculated about it. Makes everything look proper and legal, while she's basically destroying people's lives. Her words confirmed what the records had already suggested. Janet wasn't just a difficult neighbor, she was systematically targeting families for harassment. By Thursday morning, Janet's retaliation campaign was in full swing. First violation notice, improper storage of moving materials with a $50 fine. the moving materials. 3 cardboard boxes that were clearly visible from the street. I hadn't even had time to break them down yet. Day 2, unauthorized dock inspection required with a $100 fee. Unauthorized? I hadn't even walked out on the dock yet, let alone used it for anything. Day 3, landscape maintenance violation with a $75 fine. The grass was exactly the same height it had been when I moved in 3 days earlier. I'm looking at these notices thinking this woman is either completely delusional or running some kind of systematic harassment campaign. Given what Mrs. Clark told me about the pattern with other families, I'm leaning towards systematic harassment. $225 in 3 days for absolutely nothing. And I got the feeling this was just getting started. The speed and intensity of the violation notices proved that Janet had perfected her intimidation tactics through years of practice on other families. Every notice was designed to create maximum stress and financial pressure while maintaining a veneer of official legitimacy. So, I did what any smart person would do. I started building a case. Security cameras went up that afternoon. I photographed every single violation notice with timestamps. I started recording every interaction and keeping detailed logs of everything that happened. My attorney Linda took one look at the violation notices and said they were complete fabrications. Apparently, none of the things Janet was citing actually existed in the HOA rules and regulations. Linda also told me about 2 other families in the community who were currently dealing with Janet's harassment tactics. One couple was seriously considering moving just to escape the constant violation notices and threats. Hearing that made me realize this wasn't just about me or my lake access. This woman was actively destroying people's lives, for some reason I hadn't figured out yet. That's when I decided to do a deeper dive into the public records. What I found was a company called Clearwater Development Partners that had purchased lake access rights from 3 different properties in our community. Each purchase was for exactly $25,000, and each one happened within days of the families surrendering their rights to the HOA. $25,000 per property. That's $75,000 total for rights that these families had already paid for when they bought their houses. The owner of Clearwater Development Partners, a guy named Marcus Williams, who runs a marina development business. I'm staring at these records thinking this is starting to look less like an HOA power trip and more like some kind of elaborate property theft scheme. Thursday afternoon, I decided to follow Janet after one of her HOA business trips. She drove to this little coffee shop about 15 minutes from our neighborhood and met with a well-dressed businessman. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but their body language was pretty telling. Lots of heated discussion pointing at papers, and then Janet walking away with an envelope. I managed to get a partial license plate on the guy's car, and guess what? It traced back to Marcus Williams Development LLC. The same Marcus Williams who'd been buying up surrendered lake access rights. I'm sitting in my car watching this transaction thinking, holy crap, this isn't random bullying. This is organized crime. Janet wasn't just harassing families for fun. She was systematically forcing them to give up valuable property rights so her partner could buy them for pennies on the dollar. The realization hit me like a truck. 3 families hadn't just lost their lake access. They'd been robbed. Their children couldn't fish from the dock anymore. Their property values had dropped, and they'd been forced to watch some developer profit from rights they'd originally paid for. And Janet, she was getting paid to destroy her own neighbors' lives. I called Ryan again to update him on what I'd discovered, but as I'm dialing, I start wondering, do I expose everything now and end this quickly, or do I let Janet keep thinking she's winning while I gather even more evidence? Sometimes patience pays off, bigger than quick action. But after seeing what she'd done to other families, I knew one thing for certain. This corruption had to be stopped, no matter what it took. The question is, am I making the right choice by waiting? Or should I strike now before she destroys another family? Janet scheduled an emergency HOA meeting at 7 p.m. on Thursday, knowing full well it was the worst time for most families. Classic power move, right? Stack the deck with people who have time to attend evening meetings on short notice. When I arrived at the community center, I saw around 21 residents, mostly retirees, who looked at me like I was the problem. Janet had clearly painted me as the outsider. The rumor mill had been working overtime too. I could hear whispers about the difficult new resident who was causing problems already. Apparently, Janet had been busy painting me as some kind of troublemaker before I even had a chance to defend myself. I walked in with my attorney Linda and a folder full of documentation, and I swear Janet's confidence wavered just a little when she saw I'd brought professional legal representation. Maybe she was starting to realize this wasn't going to be as easy as her previous victories. Janet opened with this whole slideshow presentation about lake safety and community standards. She had photos of overcrowded lakes, statistics about liability issues, charts showing property value impacts. Real professional-looking stuff that would convince anyone who didn't know she was basically making it all up. Unrestricted lake access creates a massive liability risk for everyone here. This is about the safety and future of the entire community, she announced, clicking through slides like she was presenting to a corporate board. The way she said it, you'd think I was planning to open a jet ski rental business or something. But here's the thing. Most of those photos weren't even from our lake. I recognized at least 3 of them from tourism websites for completely different states. Did she really think no one would notice? Or maybe she just figured her audience wouldn't bother to fact-check her presentation. When it was my turn to speak, I kept things simple and factual. I showed my property documentation, the deed that clearly included lake access rights, and the legal paperwork for my house purchase. Mr. Thompson's lake access rights are literally part of his property deed, Linda explained to the group. The HOA cannot legally force him to give up rights that are written into his property ownership. Pretty straightforward, right? But Janet immediately jumps in with, community safety overrides individual wants. This is about protecting everyone. Individual wants. Lady, we're talking about legal property rights that I specifically paid for. The way she kept framing it like I was some selfish newcomer demanding special privileges, when really I was just trying to use rights that were already mine. I mean, did she think I was going to just roll over because she raised her voice? Her aggressive response only proved that she was threatened by the legal facts I'd presented. Then to everyone's surprise, Mrs. Clark stood up, her voice shaky at first, but growing stronger as she spoke. I have to say, watching this 79-year-old woman find her courage was probably the most inspiring thing I'd seen in years. Her voice was shaky at first, but she looked Janet right in the eye and said, "Janet, you used these exact same tactics against the Miller family, and the Parkers, and the Williams family." The room got so quiet you could hear people breathing. "You harassed them with fake violations and daily threats until they gave up just to get some peace." Mrs. Clark's voice got stronger as she continued, and I could see the power dynamic shifting in real time. "You told us those families were troublemakers too, Janet, but they weren't troublemakers. They were just people who wanted to enjoy the lake access they'd paid for." I could see the mood in the room starting to shift as people remembered those families. Maybe Janet's version of events wasn't as accurate as they'd been led to believe. The community reaction was fascinating to watch. You could literally see the room divide into 2 camps as Mrs. Clark spoke. Some people were nodding along, clearly remembering the families she mentioned. "I remember the Williams family," one neighbor said. "They weren't causing any problems. Those kids just liked to fish." But Janet still had her supporters too. "Janet's kept our property values stable for 7 years," another resident argued. "Maybe we need to trust her judgment on community issues." The tension in that room was thick enough to cut with a knife. I'm sitting there thinking this is exactly the kind of division Janet probably creates everywhere she goes. Turn neighbors against each other so no one can organize against her tactics. Pretty smart strategy, actually, if you're into destroying communities for personal gain. But Janet was getting desperate, and desperate people make mistakes. Her voice got shrill, and she started shouting, "This is exactly the kind of division these troublemakers cause." Troublemakers. There's that word again. Then she points right at me and says, "I don't care who you think you are. The rules apply to everyone, who I think I am." That was my opening, and I decided it was time to give Janet a little preview of what she was actually dealing with. "Janet, before you keep making threats and accusations, there's something you should know about me." The room went completely silent. "I'm Kyler Thompson of Thompson Rodriguez Marina Group. We work with lakefront communities across this entire region." I could see Janet's face change as the implications started sinking in. Her confident facade was cracking, and for the first time, uncertainty replaced her usual arrogance. "My business partner Ryan Rodriguez owns the largest marina consulting company in 3 states, and we've been planning a major project for this lake for 2 years. You should have seen Janet's reaction. For the first time since I'd met her, anger wasn't the dominant emotion on her face. There was uncertainty there, maybe even a little fear. But she doubled down anyway, shouting, "I don't care who you think you are. The rules apply to everyone. The rules, right. The same rules she'd been making up as she went along to harass families into surrendering their property rights. This community will not be intimidated, she declared, but her voice cracked just a little on the word intimidated. Kind of ironic, considering intimidation had been her primary management strategy for 3 years. We'll see what the courts have to say about your so-called business connections, she threatened. Courts, lady, you're the one who has been operating outside the law this whole time. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. The meeting ended without a resolution, but one thing was clear. The game had changed. I had the upper hand now, and Janet knew it. You could feel it in the room. People were having quiet conversations, questioning things they'd taken for granted, wondering if maybe Janet's version of community leadership wasn't as beneficial as they'd believed. Janet made a quick exit, but not before shooting me a look that was equal parts hatred and fear. Mrs. Clark came over as people were leaving and squeezed my arm. "Be careful, honey," she whispered. "When Janet feels cornered, she gets dangerous." Dangerous? I mean, what's the worst she could do? Send me more fake violation notices. But looking at Mrs. Clark's expression, I got the feeling there were aspects of Janet's behavior that I hadn't discovered yet. What exactly had she done to the other families when they tried to fight back? As I watched Janet leave, I realized I'd just declared war on someone who had been playing this game for 7 years. She knew every dirty trick, every legal loophole, every way to make people's lives miserable until they gave up and moved away. And now, she was going to use all of that experience against me. But I had something she didn't expect. Resources, connections, and a business partner who was about to arrive with enough firepower to end her reign of terror permanently. The question is, am I ready for what's coming next? Tuesday morning, while sipping coffee on my deck, a sleek black Tesla pulls into my driveway. Ryan Rodriguez steps out of the car, exuding authority with every step. 43 sharp and instantly commanding attention. We've been business partners for 8 years now, and we've got this great division of labor. I handle the technical side of Marina projects, he handles the business and development side. Together, we've successfully transformed waterfront assets in 6 different communities, always with the goal of creating something that benefits everyone involved. Ryan takes one look at my lake access and grins. Perfect spot for our plan, Kyler. By noon, everyone knew the Marina guy was in town. People started gathering around the community center, some curious, some nervous, some probably wondering if this was good news or bad news for their property values. Ryan suggested we hold an impromptu community meeting to explain what we'd been planning. Better to get ahead of the rumors, he said, and honestly, he was right. Janet had probably been spinning stories all morning about outside developers coming to destroy their peaceful community. When we walked into that meeting, you could feel the tension, but also the curiosity. Ryan launched into his presentation, working the room effortlessly. Kyler and I have been planning an eco-friendly marina development project here for 2 years, he explained, pulling out architectural drawings and environmental impact studies. We're talking about sustainable waterfront development that creates good jobs for local people while protecting the lake's natural beauty. The drawings showed a beautiful marina complex with native landscaping, solar panels, and boat launches designed to minimize environmental impact. Our track record shows that communities typically see property values increase 30 to 40%. Plus, we're looking at about 60 permanent jobs and part-time work for students and retirees. You could see people's attitudes shifting as they realized we weren't talking about some cheap development that would ruin their lake. I decided to mention something that's been on my mind lately. You know, I've shared stories like this one before. Communities that discover their biggest problem was actually their biggest opportunity. Ryan nodded and continued with the presentation, but I could see people processing what I'd said. Maybe they were starting to understand that this wasn't just about business for us. It was about creating something meaningful. Honestly, if someone tried to steal your property rights on day one, would you fight back or just give in to keep the peace? But then Ryan's tone got serious, and you could feel the mood in the room change. Unfortunately, someone has been actively sabotaging this project before it even started, he said, pulling out a thick folder of documentation. Mrs. Hutchinson has been secretly meeting with our competitors, taking money to harass homeowners into giving up their lake access rights. The room went dead silent. She's been systematically selling those rights to a competing developer for $25,000 each, essentially stealing from families who'd already paid for those rights. I watched Janet's face as Ryan laid out the evidence. Emails, text messages, bank records showing payments from Marcus Williams' development. She looked like she was watching her entire world collapse in real time. Ryan pulled out side-by-side photos of both development projects. Their Plan A budget marina with maximum housing density and minimal environmental protection. Maybe 12 jobs, all minimum wage. Then he showed our plans again. Our plan: 60 good-paying jobs, environmental protection, and a marina that enhances your community instead of just exploiting it. The contrast was stark, and people were starting to understand what Janet had almost cost them. She was willing to trade your community's future for personal profit, Ryan said, looking directly at Janet. The community reaction was volcanic. People were shouting questions, expressing disbelief, demanding answers from Janet. You mean she's been lying to us this whole time? She told us marina development would hurt our property values. The anger in that room was intense, and I have to say it was completely justified. These people had trusted Janet to protect their community, and instead she'd been systematically betraying them for money. Mrs. Clark stood up, her voice shaking with fury. Janet, you destroyed 3 families for money. You made those children move away from their friends for money. I've never seen a 79-year-old woman so angry, and honestly, she had every right to be. Janet tried to defend herself, claiming she was protecting the community and exploring all options to ensure the best outcome. But when people started demanding to see the bank records Ryan had brought, she couldn't deny taking payments from Marcus Williams. I never took any money, she insisted. But Ryan had copies of the deposits right there in black and white. $25,000 here, $10,000 there. Payments that coincided perfectly with each family's surrender of their lake access rights. The evidence was overwhelming, and Janet knew it. My attorney Linda explained that taking money while serving as HOA president was a serious violation of her fiduciary duties. The community called an immediate vote for Janet's removal, and it was unanimous. Not a single person voted to keep her as HOA president. Watching Janet's humiliation was, well, I'm not going to lie, there was some satisfaction there. This woman had destroyed 3 families, stolen their property rights, and tried to intimidate me into giving up mine. Now she was being forced to publicly acknowledge her wrongdoing in front of the entire community she'd betrayed. I was just trying to do what was best, she said weakly, but Mrs. Clark cut her off. You were trying to do what was best for your wallet, Janet. After the vote, Janet gathered her things and left without another word. I watched her drive away, probably for the last time, and wondered if she understood the magnitude of what she'd lost. The community immediately voted to approve our marina development project. The enthusiasm was incredible. People were excited about the jobs, the property value increases, the environmental benefits, everything we'd planned to bring to their community. I spent the next hour shaking hands with dozens of neighbors who were now supporters instead of skeptics. It was amazing how quickly things could change when people understood what was really happening. But as I watched Janet drive away for the last time, I couldn't help thinking about how this all started, with her trying to intimidate one quiet neighbor. Now she'd lost everything: her power, her reputation, her schemes. But I knew this wasn't over. People like Janet don't disappear quietly. The legal system responded swiftly to Janet's corruption. A week later, the county HOA Oversight Board launched a thorough investigation, and let me tell you, they did not mess around. Janet faced fines, including $2,400 from our community alone. She also had to pay legal fees totaling $4,800 for the families she'd harassed. But the real consequences went deeper than money. She was banned from serving on any HOA board for 5 years, which effectively ended her little power trip permanently. The competing developer who had been paying her, they dropped her like a hot potato and actually threatened to sue her for contract fraud. Her real estate license was under review for ethical violations, and honestly, I doubt she'll ever work in property management again. The Millers, Parkers, and Williams families all filed lawsuits for harassment and fraud. My attorney Linda helped them build really strong cases, and the evidence was overwhelming. Janet's harassment was systematic and intentional, Linda explained to me. She deliberately caused these families emotional distress and financial harm for personal gain. The Williams family's case was especially satisfying to me because they'd been forced to relocate with 3 young children. Those kids had to leave their friends, their school, their whole lives because Janet wanted to make money off their lake access rights. Think about it. If someone forced your family out of your home through harassment and lies, wouldn't you want them to face real consequences too? The legal system was finally holding Janet accountable for every family she'd destroyed and every life she'd disrupted with her corrupt schemes. But the real transformation was what happened to our community. It was like someone had lifted a dark cloud that had been hanging over the neighborhood for years. Overnight, the atmosphere became friendlier, more open, more collaborative. People who hadn't spoken to each other in months were suddenly having conversations over their fence lines. The HOA meetings went from tense confrontations to actual productive discussions about community improvements. Within 1 month, we elected a completely transparent HOA board with recorded meetings, community vote requirements for major decisions, and a rule that all violation notices had to be approved by at least 3 board members. No more one person wielding absolute power over everyone else's lives. I reluctantly agreed to serve as treasurer because honestly, after everything that had happened, I wanted to make sure our finances were handled with complete transparency. The Marina project moved forward incredibly fast once we had genuine community support and environmental compliance approval from the county. We held regular community meetings to update everyone on our progress, and the excitement was contagious. People were talking about the Marina store, the community boat launch, the lakeside park we'd planned as part of the development. Local high school students were already submitting applications for summer jobs, and contractors were bidding on different phases of the construction. The whole community was benefiting even before we broke ground just from the anticipation and planning process. Property values started climbing immediately. We're talking about an average 38% increase within 3 months of the project announcement. Houses that had been sitting on the market for months were suddenly selling within weeks. Mrs. Clark became something of a local hero, and rightfully so. The community held a special meeting just to honor her courage in standing up to Janet when everyone else was too intimidated to speak out. If it wasn't for Mrs. Clark's bravery, I told the assembled neighbors, Janet might still be harassing families and stealing their property rights. Watching that 79-year-old woman get the recognition she deserved. It was one of those moments that reminds you why fighting corruption is so important. She could finally tend her garden and enjoy her property without fear of harassment or retaliation. The other families who were currently being targeted by Janet, all their violation notices were immediately dismissed and their fines were refunded. The relief on those people's faces was incredible, like they could finally breathe again after months of constant stress and intimidation. Construction began in late spring, and honestly, it became a community event in itself. Kids were playing on the supervised construction site during their summer break. Elderly residents were watching the progress from lawn chairs on their decks, and everyone had this sense of ownership and investment in what we were building together. The local news picked up the story as an example of how businesses and communities could work together for mutual benefit instead of one exploiting the other. The groundbreaking ceremony felt like a celebration of everything we'd accomplished. We went from a community divided by fear and corruption to a community united by shared goals and genuine leadership. Janet's departure was quiet and somewhat pathetic. She put her house on the market and tried to relocate somewhere she could start over without the baggage of her corruption scandal. But the competing developer was pursuing legal action against her for contract fraud, and her house sat empty for months because, well, who wants to buy property from someone with that kind of reputation? When she finally sold it was at a significant loss. Mrs. Clark, who had lived next to Janet for years, had mixed feelings about it all. She made her choices. She told me one afternoon as we watched the construction progress, justice is about both punishment and positive change. Janet was held accountable for her corruption, which was important for the families she'd harmed and for the integrity of our community. But we also created something positive from the whole mess. Vindication for the families she'd victimized, a stronger and more democratic community structure, and a beautiful marina development that's going to benefit everyone for years to come. Sometimes the best way to deal with corruption is to build something so much better that people forget the corrupt person ever existed. 6 months after this all began, I'm sitting on my dock, watching the marina construction, and everything worked out better than I could have imagined. But I keep thinking about something Mrs. Clark said, there are more Janets out there. That makes me wonder, how many other communities are suffering under corrupt leaders right now? But I knew this wasn't over. People like Janet don't disappear quietly. 6 months later, I sit on my dock, coffee in hand, watching the marina construction ahead of schedule at 40% completion. The transformation has been astounding. Local unemployment dropped 18%, 3 new businesses opened, and sales surged at the hardware, grocery, and gas stations. Mrs. Clark started a scrapbook of the Marina project, which we plan to display in the office once finished. She documents everything from the initial conflict with Janet to the groundbreaking ceremony to the daily progress photos. It's going to be a great reminder of how a community can overcome corruption and build something amazing together. The community dynamics have completely evolved from what they were under Janet's reign of terror. What used to be tense confrontational HOA meetings have become collaborative planning sessions where people volunteer for committees, suggest improvements, and work together toward shared goals. The transparency we implemented has made all the difference. Our financial records are posted online, major decisions require community votes, and violation notices need approval from multiple board members. My role as community liaison for the Marina project has been incredibly fulfilling, ensuring that resident concerns are addressed and that the development truly serves the community's interests. I never expected my quiet retirement to turn into meaningful community leadership, but honestly, it's been more satisfying than anything I did in my tech career. The ripple effects of our success story have been pretty amazing to watch. I get emails from homeowners in other communities who are dealing with similar HOA corruption issues, asking for advice on how to fight back effectively. Janet's case has actually strengthened homeowner rights at the county level, and HOA presidents across the region are starting to understand that there are real consequences for intimidation and harassment tactics. Mrs. Clark and I have become informal consultants for other communities trying to implement transparency and accountability in their governance structures. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I just signed Janet's paper that first day. Would you have fought for your rights or taken the easy way out? I'm glad I chose to fight because it turned out to be about so much more than just my personal property rights. The Marina business has expanded beyond our original plans due to the success of the Clearwater project. We signed 4 new contracts based on Clearwater's success and were featured in Marina Management Today as innovators in sustainable development. Environmental groups have endorsed our approach as a model for protecting natural areas while creating economic opportunities. The Clearwater project has become our flagship example of how development can strengthen communities rather than exploit them. Ryan and I are even working on a book about community-centered business development, with proceeds going to a scholarship fund for local students interested in environmental engineering and sustainable business practices. My personal growth through this whole experience has been unexpected and profound. I came here looking for solitude and peaceful retirement, but I discovered that important conflicts often choose us rather than the other way around. Standing up to Janet's corruption wasn't just about protecting my property rights. It was about defending the principle that ordinary people deserve to be treated with dignity and respect in their own communities. The combination of my technical business background and the relationships I've built with neighbors like Mrs. Clark turned out to be exactly what was needed to turn a corrupt situation into a positive transformation. Sometimes the skills you never thought you'd need turn out to be the most important ones you have. The community achievements keep growing organically from the foundation we built during the fight against Janet's corruption. We now have a lake fishing program for children run by volunteers who teach water safety and environmental conservation. Mrs. Clark started a community vegetable garden where she teaches young neighbors about growing their own food. There's a boat club for elderly residents and a scholarship fund for local students funded by Marina profits. These aren't programs that were imposed from the top down. They're initiatives that community members suggested and implemented because they're no longer afraid of retaliation from corrupt leadership. Young people in the community are looking at what we accomplished and getting interested in business, community organizing, and local government. That gives me hope for the future. The recognition we've received has been gratifying, but more importantly, it's helped spread awareness about what communities can accomplish when they work together. The county presented us with a Community Excellence Award at our Marina groundbreaking ceremony, and the mayor praised our innovative partnership between business and residents. Mrs. Clark received Citizen of the Year recognition for her courage in opposing corruption, which she absolutely deserved. But the real reward is watching our community thrive and knowing that we've created something that will benefit families for generations. We're planning a Phase 2 expansion that includes a conference center where other communities can come to learn about partnership building and democratic governance. The goal is to help other places achieve what we've achieved here. As I sit here watching our community flourish, I can't help but think about all the other Janets out there still bullying families, still stealing people's rights, still corrupting the communities they're supposed to serve. Part of me wants to just enjoy my peaceful retirement now that our local fight is over. But another part of me wonders, should I be doing more to help other communities fight back against corruption? Is one victory enough, or is this just the beginning of something bigger? Mrs. Clark and I talk about this sometimes, as we watch the Marina construction progress. Maybe our real legacy won't be the Marina itself, but the proof that ordinary people have the power to stand up to bullies and build something beautiful in place of corruption. Sometimes the quiet neighbor you underestimate turns out to own more than just a house. They own the power to change everything. A year after Janet stormed into my house demanding my lake access, we held our first annual Lake Freedom celebration. 35 families attended, including newcomers drawn by our reputation and the Marina project. Children were playing on the new playground we'd built. Near the water, adults were fishing from the accessible dock that Janet had tried to steal from everyone, and there was this incredible sense of accomplishment in the air. The Marina was now 60% complete with pre-leased boat slips and a waiting list of people who wanted to keep their boats here. Mrs. Clark, now 80 years old, sat with me on the dock as the sun set over the lake. "You got your peaceful retirement after all," she said with a smile, "just not the way you expected." I laughed because she was absolutely right. "Plus, 62 good jobs and the most beautiful marina in the region," I added. "Sometimes the best plans are the ones life forces you to change." Looking at our community now, it's hard to believe this is the same place that was paralyzed by fear and corruption just 12 months ago. The economic success has been incredible. Property values increased an average of 41%, and there's now a 6-month waiting list for homes in our neighborhood. Local businesses are thriving from the increased traffic and new residents, and the whole area has this energy and optimism that just wasn't there before. But more importantly, we've restored trust. People speak up at meetings, they collaborate on solving problems, they have the courage to voice concerns because they know they won't face retaliation from corrupt leadership. That transformation in community spirit is worth more than any financial gain we've achieved through the Marina project. Janet never returned to Clearwater Lake after her public humiliation at that community meeting. She sold her house at a 30% loss to a young family with 2 children who absolutely love having lake access. The legal consequences caught up with her in a big way. She ended up paying significant financial settlements to the families she'd harassed, lost her real estate license, and had to declare bankruptcy just to pay the judgments against her. Last I heard, she was working as a grocery store clerk, 3 states away, starting over with nothing but the consequences of her own choices. I know some people might think her punishment was too severe, but what would you do if someone destroyed your family's life for money? Mrs. Clark put it best. She made her choices. Now she has to live with the consequences. Justice isn't always pretty, but it's necessary. The continuing ripple effects of our story have been amazing to witness. The county strengthened HOA board oversight, and the state is actually considering new homeowner protection laws based partly on what happened here. Other communities dealing with corruption have found the courage to fight back, and we get letters from people crediting our story with giving them hope that bullies can be defeated. Mrs. Clark and I have expanded our informal consulting to help communities understand their rights, build coalitions, and implement peaceful resistance strategies when dealing with corrupt leadership. It's become a meaningful part of our retirement, helping other people achieve what we achieved here. The practical advice we share: document everything, understand your legal rights, find allies, think bigger than just your immediate problem. These strategies work anywhere people are being bullied by those in power. The Marina business has established itself as a leader in sustainable waterfront development, with projects now spanning 6 states based on our community partnership model. We're proving that you can run a profitable business while strengthening communities rather than exploiting them. The book Ryan and I wrote about community-centered business development has been used in college courses, and the scholarship fund from the proceeds has helped 12 local students pursue degrees in environmental engineering and sustainable business. But the real proof of concept is right here at Clearwater Lake. Families are using the waterfront that 3 other families were forced to abandon children, are learning to fish from the dock that Janet tried to steal, and no future HOA president would dare try Janet's tactics, because everyone knows the community won't tolerate that kind of abuse. I've learned some important life lessons through this whole experience that I think are worth sharing. First, take time to understand the rules that govern your life. Bullies count on people being ignorant of their own power. Second, in any conflict, evidence beats emotions every time. So keep records, take photos, save emails. Third, nobody wins fights like this alone. So find other people who share your interests and build coalitions. Fourth, anger and emotion might feel good in the moment, but calm professionalism is always more effective in the long run. And finally, don't just fight for yourself. Fight for principles that will help everyone. When you think bigger than your immediate problem, you can turn personal conflicts into positive community change. The true victory for me wasn't Janet's punishment or our financial success. It was watching Mrs. Clark teach kids to fish from the dock. Janet tried to steal. It's seeing families enjoy the lake access that 3 other families were bullied into abandoning. It's knowing that no future corrupt leader will dare try Janet's tactics, because our community has learned that ordinary people have the power to fight back and win. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's building something so beautiful and successful that everyone forgets your enemies ever existed. That's exactly what we've done here at Clearwater Lake. So, here's what I want everyone watching this to understand. If you're facing your own HOA nightmare property dispute or community corruption, remember that you are stronger than you think. That quiet neighbor might surprise you with hidden skills and connections. That elderly lady might be braver than anyone imagines. That person getting bullied might just have exactly what's needed to turn the tables completely. Don't give up when you're facing corruption or intimidation. Document everything that happens. Find allies who share your interests. Get professional help when you need it. And most importantly, think bigger than just your immediate problem. How can you turn your conflict into something that helps your entire community? That's how you create lasting change, instead of just winning temporary battles. As I finish this, I gaze across Clearwater Lake at the Marina silhouetted against the sunset. Families are enjoying the waterfront. Children are playing safely near the water, and neighbors are connecting with each other in ways that would have been impossible under Janet's reign of terror. Even Janet's old house now has a swing set in the yard, children's bikes on the driveway, a garden gnome by the front door, and a welcome mat that actually means welcome. That transformation tells the whole story right there. And to any other corrupt HOA leaders who might be watching this, think twice before you demand that someone give up their property rights. Sometimes the quiet neighbor owns more than just a house. Sometimes they own the power to change everything. The sign at our community entrance now reads, Thompson Rodriguez Marina Group, Community Development Building, Communities, not just marinas. That's our legacy, and I couldn't be more proud of what we've accomplished together. As the sun dips below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the lake, I take a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything we've fought for. It's a moment of peace, something we've earned. The laughter of children echoes in the background, and I smile knowing that we've turned this place into a true community, a place where everyone belongs. This is only the beginning, and I can't wait to see what we build next. Together we've proven that the quietest voices can create the loudest change.
Appreciate you sticking with us at QA Stories. Hit that bell so you never miss a moment, because things only get crazier from here.